Everybody got so quiet. That means it's time to go. Hi guys, how's everybody doing? Yay! I am so excited to be here today, you guys. As you know, I love talking about science. And I love spilling the beans on all the occult origins of scientific things, no matter what they are. So I'm very excited to share a lot of this knowledge with you guys today, and I hope that you are too. There's a couple things. First of all, we do have like a little camera here today, so if anyone's weird, like if you guys are scientists and you can't have your faces shown that you were at this meeting today, just come up afterwards and let us know, and it's totally fine. We'll just like put one of those little boxes over your eyes, you know. Or if you're like a member of the church and they can't know that you do this, whatever, you know, no judgment, just let us know. And then of course, after today's lecture, we have a special treat. Featherbeard will be having his record released, so if any of you guys didn't know about that, it's definitely worth it to hang out for a little while after and enjoy the festivities. Woo! Oh, great, free food and drinks. If that don't get them, I don't know what will. So today, you guys, we're going to be thinking about and talking about how do we know stuff? How do you guys know what you know, right? It's a big issue for people. I know I deal with it all the time, trying to find truth. To find things that are real, that are true, is kind of a lifelong quest. So I like to find as many tools as I possibly can to aid me in this quest along the way. So of course we look at, well, how have people from the beginning of time found stuff out, found stuff to be true? How many of you guys have ever had something that you had to know, to figure out? I'm not just talking about like a spelling test in school or something like that, but maybe you were like stranded in the wilderness and you had to figure out how to survive, or maybe you were lost and you didn't have a phone and you had to figure out, where am I? Have any of you guys ever been in a situation like that? Okay, so there are, outside of our pampered lifestyles, still in the world, situations where people actually have to know stuff. Or at least, this is my whole thing, you need to know how to figure out how to know it, right? You don't have to know everything in the world, but if you know how to find out, that's all you got to know. I told that to my biochemistry teacher when we had to memorize all the amino acids. I said, I don't need to memorize them if I know what book they're in. And he didn't really think that was an acceptable answer. So today we're going to be looking at what are some ways that you guys can know stuff, people can know stuff, and some societal remedies that I would like to invoke in this lecture today to try to eradicate a lot of forms of ignorance. We'll be talking a lot about science and how the whole science thing started and was formulated and some of the aspects in it. One of the favorite things of scientists to do is to debunk the occult or alchemy or divination or any kind of magical things. How many of you guys are like familiar with that jive? Yeah? So today's my favorite thing to talk about because science comes from all of those things. And it's a little hobby of mine to remind scientists when I'm having conversations with them just where it is that they got the things that they know. That's always a good time, right? Because usually if you ask them, well, how did anyone find out this thing about this? How did someone discover benzene? For example, we'll be talking about that today. They may be a biochemist and they may deal with benzene every day. Their little fingers might touch benzene in a little petri dish all day, every day, but you know what? They have no idea how someone figured that out, which is shocking to me, right? You can screw in a light bulb every day and have no idea where that darn thing comes from. How many of you guys have those new little whatever they're called, the light bulbs with the swirly things? They're supposedly like low emission. Do you guys know what's in there? Poison's in there. It's true. Mercury fumes will kill you if you break that thing and breathe it in. That's a little bit of information you might want to know about. Do they tell you these things? No, you have to find out for yourself, right? So a big part of the lecture is mostly to encourage everyone to keep your mind open, keep it inquisitive, ask questions for yourself, right? We don't need to figure out everything all the time, but the more we can kind of verify things on our own, that's how we truly start to become magicians, and we're not schmucks, right? So throughout history, there seem to be several ways that we know things. Okay, there was a really smart Indian fellow. His name was Sri Swami Sivananda. For any of you guys know, he's an Indian philosopher and yogi. And he said there's 4 sources of knowledge. 4 sources. He said instinct, intuition, reason, and direct experience. Okay, those are like, how are you going to know? Let's say you need to figure something out. What are you going to do? Well, we can go on the internet, right? We'll Google it. Well, what does that mean? That means you're looking at someone else's direct experience of it. So I like to add in there, you can hear from other people that have done one of those 4 things too, right? In the West, for example, they're like, oh, look, these Chinese guys figured out gunpowder. We'll just go ahead and use that, right? So you can do things directly yourself, or you can have some smarty pants friend that figures everything out for you and kind of like follow them on Twitter. Right? So it's another thing to kind of get a source, right? But the problem is then you got to trust your sources, and everybody makes mistakes. So you always want to double check things. You got to check facts. I make mistakes. I have some nefarious sources for some of my information. I'll just go ahead and admit that right now. But if you kind of like feel it out, check it out a little bit, you want to look it up in maybe a few places, because you don't know, maybe that conspiracy website is not necessarily the most trustworthy source of information. So I've kind of broken it down to here's how we can know things. We can observe them, have a direct experience of them. Oh, that fire's hot because it just burned my hand. Most of us as children will do that even though our mother tells us it's hot. Right? We don't trust that source, so we'll just go ahead and do it anyway. Oh yeah, watch this. Quit doing that. You're going to hurt yourself. Oh darn, I hurt myself because I didn't listen to that source of knowledge. Right? And then the other one, which the Indian philosopher mentions, sorry, I'm still phlegmy. So the other one is what they call a priori knowledge, which is what the philosopher Kant calls it. And it's instinct, which I know you guys have heard me harp on instinct before, but I can't believe people just accept instinct as, oh yeah, that's just instinct. Well, how did that little tiny baby tiger know to sink its tooth right into your jugular? Oh, that's instinct. What does that mean? What do you guys think it means if you're walking down the street and your entire body jerks back if you hear a sound that means it could be a car, that instinct? That's knowledge that comes from nothing, right? You have no experience. You automatically do it. What does that mean, you automatically do it? Can you think about that for a second? Where's the auto? Who's driving? Where is that information coming from?
Your ancestors.
I like to think about it as DNA, right? This is knowledge that's stored in our cellular memory, not in our brain. It's probably in the brain too because you got DNA in there as well, but it's actually all that junk DNA that they like to talk about has actually stored all these biological experiences to let you know what to do when a car is pummeling towards you, right? So there's that kind of instinct, but then there's also intuition. Now intuition is even weirder because that's not stored in your DNA, that's stored in the ether, right? That's in what a lot of new agey people call your aura, which I know now everyone's going to go, oh God. But listen, how many of you guys have ever had an intuition or a premonition and then had it happen? You think that was stored in your DNA? Is that DNA? I don't think so. That's coming from another source entirely. And I like to put that into the category of dreams, channeled information, the muse. For those of you guys that are musicians, how did you know a song when you wrote it? How many of you guys have ever experienced having a song just come right out through your fingers? Okay, so quite a few. Where is that? Where do you guys think that is? Magic. Right? And that happens more often than people actually make discoveries with their brain, I think. Right? There's more musicians writing songs from their muse than there are scientists figuring out the way the world works. Okay? So we have the muse. You also have what that's called your HGA, is what Aleister Crowley called it. Your guardian angel, your daemon. It's your higher mind, your spirit mind, and that's where you get into all the Akashic aura stuff. Now, you can go ahead and poo-poo it, but all you have to do is have an observance or direct experience of it, and now all of a sudden, ooh, it's scientific knowledge of an a priori intuitional fact, right? Now, because you can't repeat it, science says it doesn't count. But we're going to get to that in a minute. The next way you can do is you can think, you can guess, you can use logic, you can say, maybe that fire's hot because it looks bright. Right? So you can deduce, you can induce, right? You can use your brain pan and kind of make guesses, okay? That's different than the intuition, though. Not quite the same thing. Because that's based on knowledge that you've acquired over the course of your lifetime. So we do have our brains good for something other than a hat rack. So those are kind of like, if you break it down, that's what we got to go from. If you know or figure anything out, chances are it's going to come from one of those places, okay? And as you guys know, I always like to think about what we're talking about and look at the words, right? So I did a little word nerding on the word know. How do we know what's knowledge, right? I've mentioned in other lectures how in Hebrew the word know can mean intercourse, right? It's actually have sex with. So think about that. It's not just a perverted thing to say. It's actually referring to the fact that if you know something, you come into contact with it. You become one with it. It's the mysterium conjunctio. If you know something, you become that thing. You try to unify with it, right? So you have a direct interaction with it, and you know something because you've lived it, you've breathed it, you've smelled it, you've rubbed it all over you, and then done a little dance in the rain, okay? Then you know, right? Because you messed with it, okay? That's like that kind of knowledge, the Hebrew kind of knowledge, okay? But if you look up the English etymology of the word know, do you guys know where it comes from? Gnosis is one of the origins. Do you know what gnosis means? Gnosko, gane, kanea, and kanawan from Old English all have a similar word in common. Recognize. Recognize. Recognize means you already knew it and you see it again and now you know it again. Cognition is thinking. So you recognate. So actually knowledge is remembering things that we've forgotten. Which the implications of that is so crazy, you guys, because that means we already know everything. It's just a matter of how much can we remember. Right? That's nuts. But how many of you guys have learned something and thought, oh yeah. It's like familiar. Right? The recognition of something. And it's similar, like, let's say we go back to the Hebrew definition of intercourse. Well, who do you pick to have intercourse with? Usually people you recognize or feel familiar with or identify with, right? So it has this whole idea that things we know, they're all present all the time, and our job as human beings is kind of just to remember things. Think about how much stuff you've ever known in your life that you've forgotten, Think about elementary school, right? A lot of forgetting we do around here, okay? So sometimes knowledge is just remembering stuff that our DNA maybe knew thousands of years ago. But how do you remember that? How do you recognize it? You need a trigger. You need something to say, oh yeah, that's it, right? So that brings us to one of the ways that scientists know things and recognize things, which is one of my favorite, which is the Epiphany. You guys know, Epiphany is such a good word. It just sounds good too. Epiphany. They're considered by scientists to be rare. However, they do acknowledge them. One of the most famous epiphanies was Archimedes, when he figured out an equation for how to find the density of something. So again, he's trying to figure out, how can I know how dense that is without actually cutting it open and like getting in there and measuring everything, right? You guys, a lot of knowledge is usually shortcuts, so we don't have to do stuff. If you guys look at the majority of knowledge in the human kind of endeavor, it's to try to make stuff so we can be lazier. Really, most of it, right? How are we going to not have to do stuff? That's how we figure stuff out. Well, if I do that, I won't have to do that, right? If I could get that cell phone, I won't have to do any of this stuff. I'll just be able to look it up on there, right? So the Epiphany is described as a manifestation or a striking appearance. It's a vision. It has to do with seeing something. When Archimedes figured that out, he was famously in his bathtub taking a bath. He wasn't even doing the science. He was relaxing, having a bath, and he goes, Eureka! Because it just fell into his head like a little rainbow just going, ba-ding! And they say that the epiphany comes only when someone has spent a long time thinking about something. So it's similar, like you have to have that knowledge already in there, and then all of a sudden you just figure it out. But that doesn't make any sense either, because the epiphany, like I said, comes not from seeing the answer, but it magically drops into your lap, like an apple for Isaac Newton. That's the other famous epiphany, right? Isaac Newton was, again, relaxing, hanging out, chilling out under the tree. The apple falls into his lap, and he's like, whoa, that's totally it. But it was an unrelated, seemingly random trigger, right? There's a story of those kind of triggers in mythology. You guys know Hermes, right? He's the whole Hermetic thing, which is where all this alchemy and magic comes from. We've got to talk about Hermes. So Hermes one day was walking down the beach, and he was thinking about music. He thought, I want to make some music. I want to make some music. How do I make some music? He's walking along the beach. He sees a turtle shell wash up on the beach right then. And he goes, symbol was the word that he said. Because he's like, that's what I'm going to make my music out of. And that was how he made the first lute or guitar. It was out of a turtle shell. He walked up while he was thinking, he was like, how do I do this? And then just God was all, here's a turtle shell. Use that, right? So they can also be tied in with synchronicities, right? So these epiphanous things where we figure stuff, we think it's us. We think we're so smart, when really it's just like a little push of a turtle shell or a drop of an apple that's like, hey, dummy, why don't you open your eyes and look right in front of you, right? And like I said, a lot of the first way we know stuff is observation, pay attention. Look at what's going on, right? Don't look at your phone, look at the thing, right? What's happening around you? Pay attention. Consciousness, right? So, we have the epiphany that just kind of appears through synchronicity, and then related to that is another one of my favorite words, which is theophany. Theophany means pretty much God just goes ahead and says, hey, dummy. Theophany is what happens when God literally appears before you and gives you the answer to something. And there's more stories of that happening. I can't even list all of them, but the amount of times that God has to show up in many forms. We're talking about Hindu gods. Greek gods, Roman gods showing up and telling people information. You guys know how many stories there are of gods showing up and telling people information? A lot in every single culture. So to me, that has to count as a way that we know stuff, because there's too many people having visions that say, God told me this. This is a good one. Here's an example. You guys know why we went to war in Iran under George Bush Sr.? He had a vision of God that told him to. I am not joking. Do you guys know Pope Ratzenberger, German dude? You know why he stepped down? He said he had a vision and God told him to. This is happening right now. People are still having visions of God coming and telling them stuff. I guess if you're the Pope, it's not that weird, but for George Bush, it's a little weird. Okay, Donald Rumsfeld also had visions of God telling him to do stuff. And these are our political leaders. Okay, no one found that weird. Everyone's like, oh, George Bush said that? Cool. That's okay. Let's go to war. God said so. That's literally what happened, you guys. Our entire nation just glossed over that. Okay? That definitely counts as a legitimate source of information if God comes down and talks to George Bush. Okay? So, if we have these as our kind of ground setters, then we go to science. Okay? This is, everyone says, oh, you don't know anything until you do science. Scientific method. It's the only way. We must do science. You guys know what the word science means? This is always fun. Science means to cut something up into teeny tiny pieces. Take a sword and just chop it up. Bam, bam. Art, interestingly, means to put something back together, which means art is the antidote to science. Right? Scientists get too crazy with making all their little human cow embryos. We need the artist to come in and say, hey, you're breaking my heart. Let me show you in this beautiful song why this is retarded. Right? Art to the rescue. So we have the scientific method. Are any of you guys scientists here? Okay, this will be more fun then. Okay, couple, it's good. So I'm not like a scientist, but I did actually get a degree in biochemistry. So I've spent a little bit of time thinking about it and doing that kind of stuff, right? So the scientific method, if we look through the history, where does this come from, right? How did we figure out how to figure stuff out? Well, it's not that easy because it goes all the way back into ancient Egypt and the alchemists and people messing around with chemicals, messing around with medicine, trying to figure stuff out using deduction and induction, right? Induction means you just make something happen and watch it go. Deduction means the thing has already happened and now you got to backtrack and try and figure it out. So it's just forward and backward. Like they induce a birth. Right? You can get it, you make it go. You can poke someone and see if he'll get mad and beat up your brother. That's induction. Deduction is you see your brother, he's been beat up, you think, well, who induced this? Right? So it's those two, it's forwards and backwards. So like for us, we're like, well, geez, there's this whole universe here, but we can't induce the universe starting again, so we got to deduce. How did it start? For example. Or we can make the CERN particle accelerator and try and redo a making of a universe. That's what they're doing. They're trying to induce because we're too dumb to deduce, right? So Aristotle was one of the biggies for starting scientific method as we know it in terms of who gets recognized. But where did Aristotle get it? Again, you guys have to know anyone that gets credit for anything, they got to get it from somewhere because it's not just poofing unless he had a theophany. Okay? Unless they're having a theophany, they got to figure it out from somewhere else. Or they just saw it happen, right? They experienced it directly, right? So Aristotle thought of empiricism. He's like, well, the sun is there in the sky, so I think it will always be there every day when I wake up. Now, the problem with empiricism is sometimes things go terribly wrong. Someday the sun shall explode upon us all. So empirically, that would be incorrect, right? So the problem with empiricism is chaos math. right? You can have something, you can be married for 40 years and then your wife will suddenly leave you for a sexy young man. Empirically, that goes out the window. All your empirical knowledge is now destroyed based on, the trickster god, Coyote. I don't think empiricism includes Coyote. So that can only go so far. And then all these people started critiquing it, right? So modern scientific method is attributed to two main characters, although there's a whole bunch of people. Now I have to shave this down so we can talk about it in the course of an hour. But the two main people that modern scientific method is based on is Rene Descartes and Francis Bacon. And then, of course, all the Greek stuff, like I said, all the Egyptian stuff, all these other characters. And then there is one other fellow, this guy named Roger Bacon. I know there's two Bacons. We've got all this pork happening in science. So the scientific method is based on Francis Bacon's 4 steps, Rene Descartes' 4 rules, and then this kind of conglomeration of other stuff that, people have figured out since then, and other people have kind of introduced, and then they found out, oh, the Chinese already knew all this stuff, so I guess we better put that in there too. So it's there's a lot of wiggle room, okay? Now, one of the ways that we know things that tends to get completely disregarded, which I'm going to spend some time on right now, is mentioned in the intuition part that I said earlier, which is dreams. Okay. Dreams are a perfectly viable way, like a Theophany to George Bush, to acquire knowledge and information. How many of you guys have ever experienced a dream which told you some information? Some quantifiable data, right? Quite a few people raised their hands, okay? How many of you people think that scientists have figured out scientific truths through dreams? So many less people. Well, this will be fun then. Listen to this, you guys. So talking about benzene, the guy that discovered benzene, his name was August Kiekel von Stratonitz. He was a German fellow, and old August had been dealing with these chemicals. Like I said, had been messing around with them every day. He was working on a structural theory. But as some of you guys know, it's very difficult. This was before electron scanning microscopes. This was in the 1800s. So it was impossible for him to see it. Couldn't see the carbon molecules. No one knew. How are they hanging out? What are they doing? What's going on in there? We don't know. How do you know? How are you going to know? You can't see it. You can't experience it. You can't ask somebody else because no one else has seen it either. Now we got a problem. How am I going to know how this works? So he goes to sleep. He has a dream about snakes swallowing their own tails. He then proceeds to have more dreams after the snake swallowing its tail dream. You guys want to hear a little bit of his dream? He said, I fell into a reverie, and lo, the atoms were gamboling before my eyes. I saw how frequently 2 smaller atoms united to form a pair, whilst the whole kept whirling in a giddy dance. He had a freaky vision of how the atoms were interacting with each other like dancing, like swirling around. Do you guys know what benzene looks like? Anybody? It's an unbreakable ring. It looks like a hexagon. And it's famous because it's extremely carcinogenic. For those of you guys that drink soda with sodium benzoate as a preservative that has vitamin C in it, when it's exposed to sunlight, it actually turns into benzene rings, which will give you cancer. So don't do that. Benzene is unbreakable. It's a solid circle. It's a snake eating its own tail. Right? He saw, this is before we could see it. And his dream was correct. His dream about atomic particles was correct. You guys think that's pretty nuts? Pretty nuts. Okay? I think it's nuts. So, another good one. This guy named Otto Loh, another German scientist in 1873, got the Nobel Prize in medicine for his dream. He had a little dream that chemicals could communicate with nerves, that it wasn't just electricity, which is why we have all these nice drugs now that can give us brain activity. Was because this guy had a dream that chemicals can go into the brain. What? And they gave him the Nobel Prize for it. He didn't figure it out. He had a dream that told him. What do you guys think about that? Pretty crazy. I think so. Another pretty good one, there was this guy named I'm going to say it wrong, sorry. He was Indian. Srinivasa Ramanujan. He was, again, in the 1800s. There was a lot of crazy dreams in the 1800s for these scientists. He came up with over 3,000 math theorems. That's more than almost anyone in the history of the world. Do you guys know how he figured out these theorems? He said every night a Hindu goddess would come and visit him in his dream and give it to him. These are actual math theorems that were correct. How many of you guys have ever figured out a math theorem? How many of you guys have ever thunk one up? Go home and try and think up a math theorem. And then ask the Hindu goddess to show it to you in your dream. Let's see which one works faster. There's a little scientific experiment that you can do. All right, we'll test which one works better, the occult or your brain. So, we also have Dimitri Mendeleev. Dimitri Mendeleev was a fellow who figured out the periodic table. You guys know how he did that? In a dream. Totally true. You guys know how many scientists look at the periodic table every single day? You guys know how many scientists would think it's poo-poo if you told them that he figured it out in a dream? Most of them. Most of them. So, when scientists choose not to include the oracle, the diviner, the alternate intuition method of learning, they would be eradicating a pretty large portion of scientific information that we've come to accumulate over the years as human beings. However, I have not shared with you the best dream of all. The scientific method, if you guys recall, there were two main gentlemen. You guys remember who those were? Rene Descartes. I so love discussing Rene Descartes. Do you guys know how he figured out the scientific method?
Angel in a dream.
In a dream. He had a dream on November 16th. 1619 was when he had the dream. And that was when the basis of his philosophy for scientific method came through him in the dream. So when scientists are all, oh, scientific method is much more plausible than occult methods. You could say, oh, did you know scientific method was figured out inside of a dream? And then they'll say, what? And then you say Descartes. And that's all you have to say. But it gets better. Do you guys know what happened to Descartes after that dream? He started having intense conversations with what he referred to as the evil demon. Do you guys hear that? He started a debate with what he called, come on in, with what he called the evil demon, the deceiver. He said that everything outside of his brain was an illusion. Okay, now he's ripping on the Indians because that's, as we know, Maja. He didn't figure that out, little Descartes. That was already a priori knowledge, okay? The Indians already did it. Most of the stuff India and China have already figured out, you guys. So he has this dream, this vision. He says there is an evil demon that talks to him and lies, the deceiver. The deceiver is always at him. So really, a significant portion of scientific knowledge evolved because Descartes was having imaginary arguments with Satan inside of his brain. I'm going to say that one more time because this is true. Rene Descartes having imaginary conversations with the evil, if you Google evil demon and Descartes, it comes up, you guys. Having conversations in his brain with the evil demon is how he came to these realizations. So, you can go ahead and tell people that science is satanic. And it's actually true because of Descartes. This was also where Descartes separated the mind and body, which is what's caused all this terrible, terrible, terrible things to happen. And you guys know why he separated the mind and body? It was because of the demon. He said, my body's an illusion. It doesn't really exist. Only my mind is real. That's where it all happened, you guys. Satanic. Okay? That is some Satan stuff. And that's what caused all these terrible things that scientists have done, like animal testing, like not attributing the body's ability to heal itself because it has no attributes. It set the study of DNA back like so far. It's just been really terrible. And it's all because everyone was listening to the devil inside of Rene Descartes' head. Okay? No one else bothered to figure it out for themselves. They just trusted, but sounds legit. Okay, evil demon, let's roll with that. They didn't teach me about Rene Descartes' evil demon when I was in school. Which brings us, excitingly, oh, those bells were nice, to the second fellow. So who's the second fellow responsible for scientific method? Francis Bacon. You guys, it couldn't get any better than Francis Bacon. How many of you guys know who Francis Bacon is? Okay, a few. This is a tragedy. We need to all be talking about Francis Bacon and how he was one of the progenitors of the scientific method. Francis Bacon was on the court of Queen Elizabeth I with guess who was his teacher? John Dee the Sorcerer. The wizard that talked to angels and came up with the Enochian alphabet was Francis Bacon's mentor for years. And then you guys know what happened. King James came in. You guys all, this is like another one of my favorite things to talk about. You guys know about King James, right? Such a joke. King James is the one that wrote the King James Version of the Bible. You guys know who edited and put together the King James Version of the Bible? Francis Bacon. The wizard. But better, you guys know King James was flamingly gay. He was so outwardly homosexual, he'd walk down the streets of London and people would scream, Queen James, Queen James. King James was put on trial for his homosexual behavior and he said Jesus was gay. He said Jesus was gay. He said Jesus had his John and I have my George. And that is where we get the term of Johns for hookers sleeping with men. I am not kidding. I can't make this up. Johns come from King James. He wrote the Bible that now people say is used to prove the homosexuals are evil. Irony. Okay? Irony. These are all fact-checkable. He was on trial. The trial was recorded. It's not like a secret. I don't understand. We need to be talking about this. Why? Anyone who talks about the Bible and gay, just say King James, dude. King James. Okay? He was gay from the time he was 14. He had his first French lover. So he was born that way, right? Anyway, King James aside, back to Bacon. You guys, by the way, Francis Bacon had such a good sense of humor that his seal and his cryptic seal for him was a pig. I'm not kidding. He would put a pig on there and it was all pig jokes. And all his cryptograms, you'll see these like little happy pigs hanging out because he was so funny and awesome that he liked to play around with stuff. Okay? So, Francis Bacon was also, I brought my handy dandy Secret Teachings of All Ages. This epic tome has an entire chapter on Francis Bacon and how he was Shakespeare. That's who Shakespeare was. You guys are all hip to that, right? So, oh, my little placeholder is too wimpy. So, there's a picture in here of William Shakespeare, and then he's got this cool little, The other thing thing that's happening with Francis Bacon, which Manly Hall so eruditely expresses, which, P.S., if any of you guys are interested, if you go to the Philosophical Research Society Library, there's an entire section of Baconiana, which is filled with tomes of books with evidence of all of this, which I had the great pleasure to be able to read while I was there. Now, Francis Bacon, Manly Hall thinks, was who started the Rosicrucian Society. Secret occult society. Also, some people say he may have been responsible for starting the Freemasons in Europe through his occult society. That's also mentioned in the Manly Hall material. Okay? Now, do you guys see why I enjoy my job so much? The scientific method actually comes from an extreme occultist who edited and organized the Bible for the gay King James. All the things scientists hate. It's so good. It makes me smile. So, we have that happening, okay? The other thing that's going on at the same time is, of course, my favorite, alchemy, is inundating all of this material. Now, if you say the word alchemy to modern scientists, they'll go, oh.
They're all horses.
Yeah. Hey, those fools, idiots. Which again, the entire foundation of science rests upon the material that was drawn up by the alchemists. There was another Bacon, believe it or not, that was responsible for inspiring the scientific method and scientific theory. His name was Roger Bacon. And he preceded Francis Bacon. He was like in the 1200s to like 1294 or something, I think he died. He was a monk, he was a friar, and he was an alchemist. And he, through studying the occult and all this stuff, laid down all the stuff that then Francis Bacon, by the way, John Dee met with Francis Bacon to talk to him and tell him about Roger Bacon. He's all, hey Bacon, guess what? Have you heard about this Bacon guy? I'm sure that's probably how it went down. Seriously. He was like, hey Bacon, did you see this Bacon dude? So he gave him all the Roger Bacon alchemical material for Francis Bacon to study. That's actually what happened. You guys know who at the same time was included in furthering science with Roger Bacon? Albertus Magnus, which if his name doesn't imply, was also a wizard, P.S. Albertus Magnus was responsible for doing all kinds of occult writings, which most of our occult knowledge is based on people's interpretations of his material. The majority of Golden Dawn material, the majority of any of the Rosicrucian stuff, all can kind of get traced back to him. So you guys see how important it is to check out your sources. If you're a scientist and you're doing the scientific method and you have no idea where that comes from, I'm sorry, but you're not paying attention and you're stupid. Why would you do something every day and you don't know what it is or where it comes from? Everyone is doing that, you guys. So many people every day are doing stuff every day. They have no idea what it is, how it started, who did it. Oh, let's just do it, whatever. Right? It's an atrocity. Maybe we don't have to go and refigure out the light bulb every single day. But if you're going to be making light bulbs or, you know, doing something with them, you think, oh, maybe I'll just look it up real quick, right? It could take you like 10 minutes to get that information in this day and age. Which brings us back to the alchemists and the occultists. Why? How do the occultists know this, you guys? Why did these guys figure, why are they so smarty pants? Because they're utilizing all the methods of knowing. Not just one or two, they're using the entire toolbox, right? Which is what I encourage all of you to do. If you got to know something, mess with it, breathe it in, rub it on yourself, do a rain dance, look it up, talk to people, right? Figure it out, do it. You guys know why the alchemists figured out so much stuff about the chemicals? They sat there in their houses with a little teeny tiny fire, figuring it out, dinking with stuff, exploding things, poking at things, going into caves like Paracelsus lived his life in a mine to go get the metals. He's trying to figure out how to change lead into gold. He actually went into the earth and got it. Right? He worked. We don't want to work. We are trying to know all this stuff, so there's less we have to do. But the people that figured these things out did it. It's that simple. Think about any scientific paradigm that was ridiculous. For example, the world being flat. How did that one get busted? Someone went and actually figured it out. Because they did it. Everyone else was like, well, I think it's that. Well, how do you know that? Well, because they said so. There's a famous line in the I Ching that I always love. It says, all your friends can tell you the water is shallow, but you're the one that drowns. Right? This is where science happens when you go to the doctor and he says, oh yeah, that Cialis is fine. Take it. And then you die. What happened there? Right? We're at the mercy of people who know things that we do not know. What has gone wrong, in my opinion, there's nothing wrong with scientific method. There is nothing wrong with it. The problem is that people aren't paying attention. The second problem, I think personally, is statistics. You guys know what statistics do? Someone gets paid $2 million, a grant to do this research, to figure out, is that true? So they're like doing it, they're like, uh-oh, that's weird. That doesn't fit, well, just statistics. We'll scoot that out of there real quick. Statistically, no one dies on Cialis. But wait, what about those guys that you actually did see die? Oh, it's nothing. Statistics. Statistics. So you guys know what statistics is actually doing? It's removing a rather large part of reality from our perception, from our knowledge. The utilization of statistics to prove theories correct means that a big chunk and portion of things that actually happened never get discussed or acknowledged or recognized so that these people can get paid. There's nothing wrong with the scientific theory. The problem is jerks, right? The problem with science and doctors is that not everyone's paying attention. There's nothing wrong with doctors. I go to doctors, I go to Western medicine. I use everything. I use herbs, I do spells, I take drugs, do everything. If someone else figured this out, why am I going to say no? But I am going to find out, well, how do they know that? What studies were they? You know what I do when I take a drug? I go and I look at the studies that they did and how people had reacted. I go on chat rooms because chat rooms are one of the only reliable sources of information left on the internet. Because it's actual people saying, I took this. He said it was fine, but then I felt terrible. I threw up for 5 days. Me too. That happened to me too. Oh my God, it happened to me and my sister. Right? Because people had direct experience of it. Right? So go to the doctor, trust your doctor, do what they say, but then go check it out a little bit. Right? Go to your mechanic. He'll tell you, well, you got to re-rig the chassis. Right? So look that up. Well, do I? What's that? Wait, that's not a thing. This guy's lying. But you know how these people operate? No one is paying attention. There's no magicians taking their cars to them that question them. Right? I'm not saying you have to be a jerk. Why can't we have discourse? You guys know what happened, what went down with Francis Bacon on the court of the Queen and the King? He had to go secret style. You guys know why he got so into cryptography and writing secrets and doing stuff? It's because King James hated the occult. He was like, you can't be a witch, but you can be gay, but you can't be a witch. No way, Jose. So Francis Bacon had to stop talking to John Dee. John Dee, of course, was humiliated, right? Even after years of correctly servicing the Queen, letting her know about the Spanish Armada, you know, just little things like that, that actually saved the country of England. So Francis Bacon, Manly Hall says he had what was called a philosopher's death, right? There was a guy who hated Francis Bacon. Francis Bacon was also a lawyer, P.S. He was a litigator, and he had his arch nemesis. This I'm totally forgetting his name. Ernest something, maybe something with an E and an O. We'll just call him E.O. Was his arch nemesis, and he tried to ruin Francis Bacon throughout his life. But you guys know why? A lady. Francis Bacon almost married this girl who then married the other guy, and then the other guy was jealous of Francis Bacon forever and then tried to ruin him, and then eventually got him disbarred and thrown out of the Queen's court. So then he had to have a philosopher's death, where they say, if you look at the records, you guys know what it says? It says he died of pneumonia studying the freezing effects on meat. This is a man who wrote tomes on medicine, immortality, taking care of your body. Do you guys really think he locked himself inside of a freezer and died that way? What a dumb thing to do. What do you think the scientists that use the scientific method think that the founder of their method locked himself in a freezer and died? They don't think that's stupid? No, probably because it wasn't him and wasn't the way that he died. He had to stage his death so that people forgot about him and went underground, became William Shakespeare, and then transmitted the knowledge through these funny stories. What a smarty pants, right? But people don't like it when you have stuff figured out sometimes because you're going to tell other people, right? If you know how to know stuff, now you don't have to go pay all this money for business consulting or whatever. Like, it's dangerous. We can't have people knowing how to know stuff because then you know stuff, right? Here's a perfect example. It's going on right now, you guys. Look at the NSA. Can you guys think about that for 1 second in terms of what I'm talking about here today? Why did they get so upset that their cover was blown? Now people know that they know what you know that they know. We can't have that. If anybody tells that they know something, you can't say that I know that. We got to get rid of you. Because only I can know that. You can't know that. Right? This is why they don't tell you that you can know things this way. And they try to tell you, oh, that's ridiculous. That's preposterous. You had a dream that George Bush didn't have a vision of God? Take him to jail. This is seriously actually what's going on, though, you guys. If you know something that the government knows that they don't want you to know, you're going to go to jail. We're living in a time when a 14-year-old boy can post a Facebook message and get arrested for terrorism. Is that any different than Francis Bacon's situation with gay King James? What's the difference, you guys? It's tyranny against the ability for humanity to know and remember things. We're trying to eradicate the ability for people to remember who they are, where we come from, what we are as human beings, our own history, right? Now why, I don't know. Now you guys can go figure that out on conspiracy theory sites. I just see with my eyeballs that that's what's happening through my perception abilities, right? Which of course is one of the main ways we can know stuff. You see it go down, man, right? Just pay attention. So, if we're going to think about why would someone not want to use all of the things available to know stuff? If I heard this guy figured out the periodic table in a dream, you bet before I go to sleep that night I'm going to be, please give me some information. I'm going to be trying. I'm going to be doing everything I possibly can to know stuff, and I do. If you find out that someone took some drugs and figured out the history of the universe, you're You're going to want that drug. Oh, but it's illegal. Can't have that drug. So sorry. Not allowed. You guys see what I'm talking about? But they can't take your dreams away unless you all get addicted to sleeping pills. Which is actually what happens to take your dreams away. Don't take those. Alright? So, try and remember the methods available to you in order to know and find things out. And you guys know what the main result of that is? You know yourself. Which, of course, is the main tenet of all occult, all religious, all supernatural knowledge comes from trying to know who you are. Use everything you can to figure that out. Ask other people. Why am I dreaming about this weird thing? That must be part of me. Oh, geez, I had a dream my axe killed my mother. Maybe that's an aspect of my psyche. Better pay attention to that. Don't leave it out in the statistical evidence. Include all the parts of yourself, demonic and otherwise. Maybe if all of us had discussions with our evil demons more often, like Rene Descartes, we might actually find out the truth. Right? We're leaving the demons out in the statistical data. So they're not getting addressed and all the shadows are building up. Nobody knows anything about them. We have no knowledge of them because we don't remember. They've now been fragmented. Right? So we need more scientific psychics. We need more psychic scientists. Right? Why would you not employ any method possibly in order to garner information on something? Right? Check it out. Keep your mind open. Try and figure these things out. If someone tells you something, this happens to us every day. Someone will tell us a little bit of gossip. You'll be like, oh my God. Did she do that? I'm going to tell my friend, dude, she totally did that. You don't know. They did that. That's why gossip is one of those terrible things, right? It's because you're promulgating disinformation, right? So think about just in terms of you living your life. What are ways that you're not utilizing your knowledge? Do you know something? What's the source? Who's your source for your gossip? Are they accountable? Or are they treacherous? Did they date the person the other person dated, like Francis Bacon's arch enemy? That's all gossip stuff. The dude that figured out scientific method was taken down over gossip. That's for reals, right? Over a chick. This brilliant man that figured out all this stuff gets taken down through that, right? So when we're trying to find out truth about stuff, just take a little bit of time. Think about it. Ask your dreams. You guys can go to sleep. Here's a fun little bit of homework for you. More fun than the math theorem. Before you go to sleep tonight, I want you to ask out loud, who am I? And ask your dream to answer you. And then write down what your dream is. It's pretty good. You can totally use it. Do it. Why not? If you guys have a problem, you're like having some serious thing happening in your life, before you go to sleep, say, please dream, can you just give me a little info on this? Can you shed a little light on this? Pull some cards, do some thinking, use your brain. And that's my favorite, just because scientists figured it out. Like, my daughter told me, well, that's not a word, it's not in the dictionary. Because I make up a lot of words. And she's a total smarty pants. So I was like, well, who wrote the dictionary? People like me and you wrote the dictionary. Who are these scientists that figured out nuclear bombs? They're not superhuman aliens, maybe. Jury's still out on that one, folks. But they're people. You're a person. Maybe we can't all know everything. We can't all be brain surgeons, but you have a brain that operates in the same manner. It's made out of carbon, right, that makes benzene, that you can dream about the snake swallowing their tails just like everybody else. So never discount your own authority or evil demon's ability to conduct information to you as well. The way that we prevent that from becoming a delusion, for example, with Rene Descartes having his weird little conversations with his evil demon inside of his head. You guys know how we can pop ourselves out to make sure we do not become delusional uber tyrants ourselves? Ask your friends, too. Hey, this demon told me blah, blah, blah. What do you think about that? I don't know, that sounds maybe not true. We got so many people. Use help, right? You guys know it is one of my favorite things when you're like, whoa, I had this crazy dream. I was on a subway. Oh my God, I had a dream I was on a subway last night too. How many of you guys have ever had that happen? Or even not dreams. How many of you guys have been like, oh, this thing happened to me, and then the person was like, oh my God, I was there too, that happened to me. That's how you know it's not delusional, because now it's shared experience. That's how we get into consciousness and knowledge, and we're not just like making stuff up in our heads. That's the phantoms, right? When you get so caught up in your evil demons with no outside experience of them, the danger is you'll generate a phantom, and now you got to go get like your friends to check out if your ghosts are real or not. Did my ex really do that, or am I tripping? You just made a phantom in your head because you're imagining that all this stuff happened, when really you could just ask them. And then use your intuition to help you know if they're telling the truth. So if you're thinking something and you want to find out, there's more ways than you know to get that knowledge. Try and expand the ways that you use to know stuff. Let your muse tell you. Let your muse come in and have a conversation with you. Make some art. Find the answer. If you guys are having a problem, sit down and make a painting. Do subconscious drawing, subconscious writing, right? If you know how to make music, use a song. It will deliver the information just as well as a mathematical theorem, right? You'll still get to the answer. So try and think about the scientific method and its origins and who these people were that thought this up. How did they think of it? They used methods that are perfectly available to all of you sitting in this room right now. So let's start encouraging people to use more of those methods and use examples when you get people that give you guff about it. Now you're armed with an arsenal of examples of how this has happened before. Help people remember, okay? Let's not forget these things. Let's not forget. That's what I have for today. Thanks, you guys.